really pleased to address to you today the role that audit committees can play in strengthening auditor independence in a very specific topic, and to share with you some of the latest developments in this area of independence. I am joined by Herman Tlako from our office, who led and conducted the research on our recent mandatory audit firm rotation research. So I'm glad that he's supporting me today. And I also really want to thank Nkonki for inviting me today to this very important initiative. I'm honored to address some of you in the audience that I've crossed paths with in the past. And I'm really honored to be here today to share this message with you. Audit committees plays a vital role in holding management and holding auditors accountable in both the public and private sector. It doesn't matter what sector you're in. Audit committees are there for a reason, independently to protect the public. Another layer of assurance that protects the public interest. So really a little bit of background, and it will transpire where I'm getting to today. It really starts with audit failures associated, and you all have heard of Enron 10 odd years ago, longer, and other large corporates in South Africa that brought the independence, in particular the independence of auditors and regulators, into sharp focus. Investors called for increased measures to strengthen independence and to bring about better audit quality. For instance, worldwide, notably in the United Kingdom and the European Union, as well as some BRICS countries, governments and regulators are focusing more on the independence of auditors. Independence is critical to the credibility and transparency of audited accounts, thereby enhancing public and investor confidence in the accuracy of financial reporting and audit opinions. Those opinions are key to the public. There's a high reliance on the content of that opinion and report. So back in a couple of years ago, in 2013, at the request of Minister of Finance, the World Bank conducted and concluded its second report on the observance of standards and codes, commonly known as the ROSC report. The minister basically adopted the recommendations made by the World Bank to strengthen accounting and auditing practices in South Africa towards enhanced competitiveness, governance and accountability in both private and public sectors. Our board at the IRBA has since adopted a 4-pillar strategy, namely comprehensive regulation that would also eventually looking towards including accounting bodies. Independence is a strategic pillar, Africa outreach and transformation. So in July last year, 2015, our board has embarked on conducting research into how auditor independence in South Africa can be strengthened. So just a public sector perspective, I think you might ask that the IRBA looks after private sector auditors and the Auditor General audits public sector entities. But I think it's important to note that some of the biggest state-owned companies in South Africa are audited by private sector firms. There is a call for harmonization between the private and public sector audit reforms, not just in South Africa, but globally. And some audit committee members are cross-cutting. I'm sure that perhaps, I'm assuming that some of you here might also be involved with private sector auditors. So this presentation might be quite relevant to you, not just in terms of the principles, but also when you're involved in such audit committees. The IRBA research was, however, not focused on the public sector, and I think I need to make that clear, but I think it's still relevant, the principles that I'm going to, and the research feedback that I'm going to give you today. Independence is important regardless of the sector. It was very pleasing to see the Auditor General Makwetu's feedback, to see that in the public sector, 73% of audit committees are providing the assurance that is required from them, the level of assurance, albeit a secondary level of assurance in the audit value chain. I think it's very encouraging to see that sort of numbers coming through, and it's important that we always strengthen that level of assurance in this value chain. So, what are the concerns in South Africa in terms of independence? There are three areas that we identified in terms of the research, and the one is strengthening auditor independence to enhance audit quality. That's the primary focus. Secondary, the other two secondary focus would be addressing audit market concentration and promoting transformation in the profession. In South Africa, besides concerns around auditor independence and continually improving audit quality, we realized that we have a particular concern around the lack of transformation in the profession at firm and individual level. Market concentration was therefore of concern to us because we wanted to understand what the impact of this is on our homegrown brands as well as mid-tier firms. At an individual level, at the IRBA, we have roughly around 4,000 registered auditors on our book at the moment, and we were concerned that we were not seeing the sufficient registration of black auditors coming through, and we wanted to understand the demographics of the profession. So those were the three focus areas that we looked at during the research that we performed over the past year or so. The board has decided to embark on research and consultation with key stakeholders in June last year into the topic of how we can strengthen auditor independence in our jurisdiction. The scope of the project considered the following three measures: mandatory audit firm rotation, mandatory audit tendering, and joint audits. The research also allowed us for exploration of other solutions or a combination of the above. So just the project timelines, basically the research has commenced in June last year, and we are still in the process of blocks of consultation, which will run up and until, say, the middle of December this year. So we are still engaging. So that is basically some of the project milestones there. But what I really want to get to is some of the research facts that I want to share with you, the highlights of our research. And the first one on independence, basically threats to independence. Why are we looking into this? I think it's important to touch on that. So basically, independence in the IRBA Code of Professional Conduct, commonly known as the Code, are comprising of two elements. The first element is the independence of mind, the independence of the mind of the auditor. But there's also a second objective of independence, and that is independence in appearance. When another professional looks towards an auditor and their dealings with their clients, it must appear independent. The moment there are things that, factors that sort of blur the lines, that is when questions are being asked by regulators, such as the IRBA. So some of the feedback, one of the significant findings was the familiarity thread between management and mostly the CFOs and the financial director levels and the incumbent auditors. Our analysis revealed that 18% of CFOs and FDs of the JSE top 40 listed companies were previously employed in the audit firm that was listed at the appointment as the appointed external auditors to that company in the annual financial statements, 18%. Further to that, looking more closer to the audit committees, 25% of audit committees of the JSE top 40 listed companies are chaired, the chairman, are chaired by a member who were previously employed by the firm that is the appointed external auditor, 25%. So this raises, coming back to the independence in appearance, if one looks at it, it raises a familiarity threat between the audit committee and the audit firm, as well as the management and the audit firm. So management and audit committees are prone to be biased towards the audit firms they had previous dealings with. So that is what came out of the research, and these are factual numbers that we researched and that I'm sharing with you. So what I'm presenting to you here is, of the top 40 companies, I'm just listing a few here where the audit tenure of the firm exceeded 20 years. You can also see the extent of the audit fees there. It's quite significant. And these are not all of them. I mean, there are many firms that are 20, 30, around those that we're not listing here, but there are a lot of them. The next one I'm giving you some feedback on is market concentration. What this slide shows, basically in terms of market concentration, is that our study found that more than 90% of the market cap of companies listed on the JSE whose audit reports were signed off by South African engagement partners are audited by members of the Big Four. So you can also see there that PwC there, 47.3% of opinions that are signed off in terms of the market cap. It's quite a significant percentage. So we have a global presence of auditing firms in South Africa. What this slide basically just shows is that the Big Four and the Big Six and the Big 10, if you want to be calling them that, are all present in South Africa and are all competing in our market. And there's definitely a healthy competition going on in our country. But some of these firms are really huge. 220,000 people working for Deloitte in 150 countries. So the next area that was covered in the research was transformation. This is just a snapshot of the racial demographics of audit partners signing off on listed companies. We analyzed all the JSE listed companies, and I think the statistics speaks for itself. So I know these are not public sector, but I thought it was important to share that with you as well, because it was part of our research. So what were further solutions suggested? So obviously after a year of intense consultation with a number of stakeholders in South Africa, the following things also came through. Strengthening of audit committees, providing audit quality indicators to relevant stakeholders such as the audit committees as a tool to measure audit quality more effectively. And I think the one example that I always use when I speak to audit committees and members of audit committees is that I think the days where audit committees only look at price is long gone. I think there's a real need for audit committees to look at more the overall quality of auditors, not only pricing, but also the qualitative indicators. Things such as the disclosure of external monitoring inspection results, those type of things came out of the consultation with investors, etc. And there are other jurisdictions where it's already prevalent, but in South Africa, we're not sharing our inspection results publicly at the moment. There's also further suggestions and real-time improvements in the auditing standards in terms of enhancing the auditor reporting. The layout of the audit report has significantly changed recently, and also enhancing audit committee reporting, the transparency, etc. thereof. There was also a call for maybe increased penalties by the IRBA and further strengthening of the audit regulator. And basically, independence have two legs, if I can explain that to you, at the regulator. One is the auditor's independence of their clients, but then there's also the independent regulator, the independence of the regulator from those whom they regulate. And that's why we call the Independent Regulatory Board for auditors. But it's to avoid regulatory capture. I think it's not really good governance and a good practice to regulate auditors, but the auditors have a say in the decisions that a regulator takes. So what is the way forward? So the board has decided that mandatory audit firm rotation or an equivalent intervention is necessary in South Africa, and such resolution was taken in August this year. The IRBA will be continuing with its consultations until the mid or around middle December this year on appropriate transitional arrangements, timing, the scope, and other implementation matters. Questions that one would ask is, how is this going to work? If there is a need to strengthen independence, how will it practically be rolled out? Is it 10 years, 15 years, etc.? So the decision of MAFR has been taken, but it's consulting now. We are consulting now on how it will look on the ground. So this is a very important period for us now to gather suitable feedback from stakeholders and investors and those that are affected by this to see what would be the best way for South Africa to roll this out. So there's more information available on the RBA website, and you can also maybe keep your eyes open to media releases that as we progress with the consultation. There's a lot happening in the background on MAFR, as you can imagine. But I think it's important for me to mention that of the BRICS countries, for instance, the whole of the European Union has adopted mandatory audit firm rotation. The BRICS countries, Brazil has it already, India has it already, China has it already. So there's definitely a global expectation in this regard, and because we're an open market and we have international investors coming into our country and that we're inviting into our country to invest, it's important that we also meet that expectation that they can trust the financial information that is presented by the auditors in South Africa. So in closing, audit committees have a critical responsibility to remain independent and objective themselves, as well as to ensure that the auditors are also independent. When you appoint and assess these auditors, independence is something that must be assessed by audit committees, especially in the corporate world. But as much as it's important there, it's also important in the private sector, public sector. It's necessary to honor the public trust that is bestowed upon those charged with governance. There is a strong focus on audit committees, and I think nobody can deny that. Where things happen in the market, people start asking questions around audit committees' involvement and decisions, and even board decisions. So there's a strong focus on audit committees to strengthen audit quality and protect the public. And initiatives such as this one we have here today is very important for us to take us forward in South Africa in terms of strengthening good governance in everything, in every aspect of business.